Former Illinois State Senator and now the chair of the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform. We call ourselves ICPR. On behalf of our board, our executive director Sarah Bruni, right there, and our senior advisor David Melton, we welcome you. Thank you for joining us for this unique opportunity to hear local leaders discuss their visions for improving safety in Chicago neighborhoods. We are proud to have such a distinguished group of speakers, including our moderator, Dr. William Sampson, and are grateful for their commitment to this issue and participation in today's important discussion. We hope you will accept our regrets. Bill Daley will not be able to join us for today's discussion. Instead, Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson will take his place and discuss how gun violence and how it affects our youth. We believe that neighborhood safety is among the most significant challenges Chicago faces. By fostering an open dialogue on this topic, we aim to join the broader effort to bring about meaningful solutions to this critical issue. Now we would like to take time to acknowledge our top sponsors who provided necessary financial support for today's event. The Robert R. McCormick Foundation, the Chicago Community Trust, Daley and George's Law Firm, Tamara and Bill Furman, Christopher B. Burke Engineering, Patricia O'Cox Family Fund, Keith Goldstein, Karen Stone Kaplan from SGA Youth and Family Services, David Melton and Nancy Siegel, Metro, Honorable John Milner, and David Moore. We also thank everyone in attendance today for your generous support. Without this type of support, we would not be able to offer these types of civic programs. As you may have noticed, we have many elected officials and former elected officials here that I also want to acknowledge. They're all honorable, so let me just say their names. I love that line. Suzanne Bassey, Jackie Collins, Don Harmon, Jin Lee, John Milner, Cynthia Pochet, Kwame Raoul, Heather Staines, and Honorable Adlai Stevenson III. We also want to acknowledge the staff of the Standard Club who helped make this event possible. And please give our servers a round of applause. Additionally, CAN TV is live streaming this event to be broadcast throughout Illinois. Many of you here today are already familiar with ICPR. We were founded 20 years ago by U.S. Senator Paul Simon, a Democrat, and Lieutenant Governor Bob Kustrup, a Republican, as a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose mission is to initiate reforms and promote public participation and civic engagement on issues that affect our state, address the role of money in politics, and encourage integrity, accountability, and transparency at all levels of government. Civic engagement is a term many of you are familiar with. Today's program is just about that. Engaging our leaders to publicly address one of Chicago's biggest challenges, safe neighborhoods. We appreciate each of our panelists' commitment to speak on gun violence and how it especially affects our youth. We plan to continue this conversation with additional programs in the months ahead. We know many of you in this audience are here because you too agree and feel an obligation to secure a safe environment for all residents, no matter where they live, work, or go to school. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Professor and Chair of Public Policy Studies at DePaul University, Dr. William Sampson.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. Thank just a star-studded panel. Actually, I was asked originally to be a member of that panel, and then when they realized that the superstars would join that, I was demoted. I think you have at your table the sort of format for this. We will bring the panelists up in groups of 2 or 3. They're each asked to address an issue that they've been informed about ahead of time. They will each have 5 minutes. I don't know how you keep politicians to 5 minutes, but they will each have 5 minutes. Then I'm told that we will hold up cards at about 3 or 4 minutes. I don't know how you get Father Flager or the former Secretary of Education to stop when we ask them. But we're gonna try it as a trap door that I can operate. And then at the end of that, there will be a few minutes for them to engage in conversation among themselves, and then it'll be time for the next group. At the end, I'm allotted a few minutes to say a few things. So what we'd like to do, and I see Father Flager's trying to hurry up to eat. I can understand that. We'd like to start with the issue of youth exposure to violence and its community level impacts with Rick Cheelander, senior columnist for the Sun-Times, who wrote just a brilliant piece, a series actually about the violence surrounding athletes at Boer High School. The Honorable Arnie Duncan, managing partner of the Emerson Collective and former Secretary of Education, and Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson, who today is doing double duty. So I will move. The 3 of them are ready. Okay, you folks are free to make your 5-minute comments. I don't know how you want to start. Why don't we start in order and start with the superintendent?
Okay, so I'll go first then. I had lead off today. All right, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here today. And I'd like to thank Rick Cheelander and Arnie Duncan for sitting on the panel with me. So, real quickly, in 2016, 768 people were murdered in the city of Chicago. Nearly 20% of them were under the age of 19, and so far this year, we're seeing very similar results. Over the last few years, we've also seen an increase in the number of offenders who are also in this age group. A lot of these shootings occur between people who know one another, and the gun is used to settle a lot of petty personal disputes. So that tells us what? It tells us that we need to do a better job at giving kids in these neighborhoods resources like education, mental health services, job training, and economic support. It also shows us the importance of positive role models, both in the home and outside of the home, like the mayor partnering with BAM, Become a Man mentorship program in a lot of the impoverished communities. Those things are huge. Parenting and mentorship is huge. You know, I talk to a lot of these kids that, surprisingly enough, will admit to the police superintendent that they've been engaged in acts of violence with handguns in terms of robberies and shooting people. I've talked to dozens of them. And the ones that turn themselves around, all of them say to me, what made them turn themselves around was somebody touched them on the shoulder and gave them hope to be better and to do better. So those things are important. But we also, at the same time, have to create a culture of accountability to ensure that a person in Chicago doesn't want to pick up a gun. You know, I've been a cop for 29 years now. And I've done nothing but chase gang members around this city. And I've seen a lot of things that you shouldn't see in a lifetime. And what I can tell you is this. You show me a kid that doesn't have hope, and I'll show you a kid that will come in this room and pick up a gun and shoot everybody in here. They have to have hope. They have to. That's imperative. And these gentlemen are part of the reason that some of them have hope now. So we are failing some of these kids because we just haven't had the will to get out there, roll our sleeves up, and do what needs to be done with them. You know, it's not an option to give up on. It's not, because if we just show them a different path, then a lot of times they'll take it. So it's up to us to dig our heels in and show them a better way to go. Thank you.
Susan Garrett asked me to stand up when I spoke. I do have a broken foot, but Marnie knows all that. Broken feet's good for it. Get a little blood flow down there. Eddie, thank you. And Susan, it's great that you organized this. And Arnie, it's an honor to be here and to be in front of all you people. I'm a sports writer for the Chicago Sun-Times. I wrote for Sports Illustrated for many years and became a columnist in 1995. For the Sun-Times, I've written, I don't know, getting up close to 4,000 columns. Sometimes I find myself repeating myself. I look up something on Google and it's by me and I don't even remember. But that happens. But I always want to be inspired and I want to be involved in this community, no matter how abstract or how simple sports writing may seem at certain times. I covered the Bulls for their great Michael Jordan years, the 6 championships, the Bears for the Super Bowl in New Orleans, 2005 White Sox World Series, 3 Stanley Cups for the Blackhawks, and of course the Cubs last year. And quite frankly, I'm done. Waited so many years for all those things, and it was such a pleasure to see those titles. But what that enabled me to focus on and think about more, what's going on in the city? What do people hear when they hear Chicago? They hear that there's this lake here that is amazing, that they can't believe there's so much fresh water. Great Lake system has 10%, 20% of the world's available fresh water. They don't know that. They see the architecture, they hear about that. But then they hear about the violence. And they hear, as you heard Eddie say, the people who were murdered last year. And almost always it's somebody who knows somebody else. It's in neighborhoods, it's in certain places. Father Flagler, I see him there, St. Sabina. I was down there looking at that church. It's beautiful in that neighborhood. But then you go past there and the wind is blowing, and you see this American flag flying upside down still to this day, the international symbol of distress. So there's this conflicting message that you get about the great city of Chicago. And it's the violence that interacts with our young people and so often with athletes. So many athletes, so many high school athletes have been killed. Some are drive-bys, some they were once in a gang but they're not anymore. So many are mistaken identity. So I tried to find a high school team, maybe that I can embed with the basketball team back in November before the season started. I talked to our prep writer, Michael O'Brien, and I talked to our Pulitzer Prize winning crime reporter, Frank Main. And we finally decided that Orr High School would be on the west side would be a good place. And the main reason was Orr is in the target, in the middle of the violence there on the west side of Chicago and Pulaski, but it also has a coach, Lewis Adams, who's a different kind of man. And Michael O'Brien said, listen, if you make your own mind up about Lou Adams, I'll tell you this, he's never lied to me. And Lou Adams is a man from Tunica, Mississippi, which was once described, which was the poorest town in the poorest county in the poorest state in the United States. And Jesse Jackson once called it America's Ethiopia. That's where Lou Adams came out of. And I've talked to him, he said, I want it out. And he got it. He was a good basketball player, but he got out. And one of the joys of his life, if you can imagine this, Lou Adams from Tunica, Mississippi, went to a rural area outside Boise, Montana, and was a firefighter as part of his college exchange type of deal. And he said he never had a better time in his life. This lone black man surrounded by white people, cowboys, everything you can imagine out in Idaho, and he loved it. Because that's the kind of open man he is. And he is a coach that enabled me to embed myself with this team. I didn't know it was a good team. I had no idea. I just knew where it was. As it turns out, they would go on to win the state 2A championship. Completely, bizarrely, without any real knowledge that it was going to happen. So as I watched these athletes develop, and I saw their teenagers, saw the gang members around them, saw the violence that they had to withstand every day to make it to practice, to do these things with this guy who was their guardian, Lou Adams, I realized that there is hope. And I talked to Arnie, and he said, he gave me hope. I said, this is impossible. This is impossible. The families are ruined. The industry is ruined. The TV is terrible. Rap is terrible. Guns are everywhere. We can't do anything. And I said, I actually am very hopeful. And after writing this series, I think in a way that I am too. Thank you.
A couple quick thoughts. The first one is that, and hopefully much of this will be obvious to you, Chicago is not an island. Chicago is in a state, and Chicago is in a nation. It is obsessed with guns. And relative to Australia, relative to England, relative to Japan, relative to Canada, we have a level of death and destruction due to guns every single year in this nation that is exponentially higher than other nations. And it's because the NRA owns Republicans and the NRA owns Democrats. There's no more powerful lobbying force that locks down common sense. When I've been in Chicago public schools, we lost on average one child every 2 weeks due to gun violence. It was a staggering rate of loss. It was by far the hardest part of our job. And quite candidly, I thought it was because the broader society didn't care about black and brown kids. And I never said this publicly, but I thought it would take white kids being killed for loss to change. Well, in DC, we never anticipated the Sandy Hook massacre in Newtown, Connecticut. And the president says publicly, and I said, that was, the president deals with the hardest issues on the planet. That was the hardest day of his 8 years of pregnancy, was the Sandy Hook massacre. He went down the next day, the vice president and I went down a couple of days later to meet with families, to see 20 little babies, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds killed, 5 teachers and a principal, unimaginable, all white. And subsequent to that, nothing changed in terms of gun legislation. I give us the biggest failure. I give us an absolute F. Nothing changed. So my belief that it would take deaths of white people to have something happen, I was 100% wrong. And whether it's inner city Chicago, whether it's Newtown, Connecticut, whether it's on a baseball diamond, this morning in Alexandria, Virginia, there's just a level of death and destruction in our nation that we allow, we permit, we condone because of our public policies are radically different than other nations. So I just want to start with that larger context. On Chicago specifically, I don't think, and people disagree on stuff, when we just talk about the crisis, people tend to give the numbers. Just one quick anecdote. We funded a couple thousand summer jobs for summer teams last summer in the South and West Sides. I was coming back to the city. Met with a room of about 10 or 12 kids and just asked them to tell me about themselves. And I always ask the question, how many of you know someone who's been shot? And always, every hand goes up. I then asked, how many know 5 people have been shot? 10 people have been shot? 20 people have been shot? I got to 20 and half the kids' hands were still in the air. And you think about what that means on the South and West Side. You think about the reality of what they have lived with every day of their life. Now, I've never been to Iraq. I've never been to Afghanistan, but I wonder whether kids who live in verifiable war zones, do they know 15, 20 people who have been shot? I don't know if they do. And our kids are living with a level of fear and trauma that almost no one in this room can begin to understand, and that is their daily reality. This is not post-traumatic stress syndrome. This is every single day trying to live, trying to survive. That's our reality right now. I also think in every crisis there's an opportunity. There are a couple opportunities right now in Chicago. Take out the gun legislation issue for a moment, but I don't want to put it all to the side. It is so violent, it is so tough out there, it is so scary that many of the young men who are a part of this world are looking to get out. And the profiles are very clear of the shooters and those being shot are exactly the same. They are primarily young black men, 17 to 24. That's 70, 75, 80% of those being shot and shooting. They're looking to change. Secondly, I think in part due to fracturing the gangs, very few guys are making money on the street anymore. There's this myth that all these drug dealers are getting rich. The truth is that very few of these guys are making much money. One of the guys we're working with, who is arguably our biggest shooter, creating absolute havoc, mayhem out there, he broke down his economics. He was making $80 a day on the street. $80 a day. So, thanks to meeting with some of the College Raiders guys a couple years ago and just talking to bunches of guys that I came back to town periodically, we decided just to try and hire them. and we're paying 12, 13, 14, $50 an hour. Nobody's getting rich. We continue to have waiting lists for every single cohort of guys we're hiring. We're trying to do a couple different things. One is obviously hard job skills and getting them ready for the legal economy. But lots of social emotional support, wraparound services, academic support. We have a fantastic small team. Heather's husband's a superstar on our team. Just working with guys to give them an opportunity to transition from the street economy to the legal economy. It is hard work. It is precarious. We have good days. We have very, very bad days. But I'll say that none of our guys have been shot. None of our guys are still shooting. Guys from our first cohort are recruiting the second cohort, the third cohort, the fourth cohort. The superintendent would have a much better idea than me, but there aren't, I don't think, 20,000 people running around shooting people in Chicago. We think that number is probably closer to 2,000. In a city of all these resources, all the wealth, everything, all the social capital and resources that we all represent, just think about, when we just plant a seed, and we're trying to do this as we speak. Think about if we went to the 2,000 guys in the city most likely to shoot or be shot and offered them a job. And offered them a chance to get the trauma care, and the substance abuse, and the wraparound services, and the academic support they need. Every guy won't take us up, but I guarantee you the vast majority will. Right. We're trying to shrink what he has to do. There's a certain number of guys he's got to run around and catch because they're a threat to society. There are a lot of guys who have been in this world who are looking to get out, and we have not given them the chance. So our program is still very small. We're growing. We're making big mistakes every day. We're learning hard lessons. But I am much more hopeful that when you and I talk, because I've seen the transformation in the lives of the guys we're working with. As a city, not 5 years from now, but like the next 5 months, we should be thinking about how we reach 500 and then 1,000 and 2,000 guys and give them an opportunity to change their lives. This is not a get out of jail card. If they don't do the right thing, they got to do their job. But I promise you, the vast majority of guys are trying to change.
Superintendent Johnson or Rick, do either of you have any response to what the Secretary said or to what anybody else said?
Yeah, I tell you this, he's right on point. You know, I tell you what upsets me when I travel outside of Chicago. As soon as I land in the airport, I've been on TV so much now that I'm becoming recognizable across the country. And I really don't like that. That's just a pitfall of being a superintendent. But what upsets me is when I talk to people outside of Illinois, they want to paint Chicago as just a violent city out of control. That's not the case at all. We're nowhere close to that. As a matter of fact, per capita, violent crime, we're actually in the middle of the pack, but you would never know that because we're one of the big three and we get a lot of national attention. And what he said about the violent offenders, we have trimmed it down to about maybe 1,500 individuals that are actually driving our violence in this city. And that's not a huge number to deal with. We don't use, I know you've heard me talk about the strategic subject algorithm. We don't use that for enforcement because there's a piece of paper called the Constitution that we still have to abide by. You know, we still have to be constitutionally correct when we do enforcement. But what we do use the list for is we go to these individuals, knock on their doors, and offer them outside services to get them back on the right path. And he's right. The vast majority will accept those resources. There are some guys tied up in it that just enjoy doing that. It's going to take a whole lot more to get them on the right path. But if we can change half or 3/4 of their mindsets, and we can, think about this for a moment. They make $80 a day, and that's no exaggeration. They don't make a lot of money, right. Most of them. They don't. But they are doing it to put food on the table for their families. The pride that you will see in one of them that takes Arnie up on his job program, first time they get that paycheck, the pride that you see that they can go home and feed their families is just huge. That's a huge win. But we have to change the mentality of these individuals. And I'll just comment on one more thing. Think about this for a moment. People mistakenly think the people involved in that lifestyle are dummies. They're not. I'm here to tell you that they are not. Some of them could be CEOs of Fortune 500 companies if they chose to go that way. Now think about this. The most valuable person in the gang structure lifestyle is someone that has the guts to go out and shoot somebody else, right? The gangs spend all of their resources on bailing these guys out of prison or jail because they're valuable. Most of these guys don't have the guts to go up to you and pull that trigger. Some do. Some do.
Superintendent, I think it takes more guts to hit somebody. It's probably easier to shoot.
Well, you know, what we're seeing now is just, you know, there's a different dynamic going on in all the major cities in terms of these shooting incidents, where before we would see them stand across the street and spray at a few people. Now they'll actually walk up to them and put them down and then stand over them and keep popping lead at them. That's a different mentality. Those guys take a whole lot more work. But to Arnie's point, if we offer them a different way out, and I know we have the resources in this city to do it, I see it every day. If we just did it, a lot of them would go in a different direction. But we have to offer them that lifestyle. Some of them think that's the only way to go.
Okay, Superintendent, I want to have to thank you, and it's probably the last opportunity I'll ever have in life to ask a police superintendent to stand down. Because we have to move on. Thank all three of you. The superintendent's coming back the second time, so you'll get your chance again. Now, Sherry Runner, who's the president and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, and Father Michael Flicker, we know from the faith community of St. Sabina. I'm well, how are you?
Good to see you.
And if you want to stand, you can. If you want to sit, you can sit. They asked me to ask you to stand, but I don't have the courage. So you can do it however you want. And why don't we start with you, Sherry?
Okay, thank you. I was kind of getting a little worried of having to speak after Father Flavor, so now I just have to speak after Superintendent Johnson and Arnie Duncan. That's all good. But as a leader of a 100-year-old civil rights organization, when we start to talk about what are some of the problems and the grassroots issues that we face in our communities, it is sometimes daunting to think about the fact that racial profiling, disproportionate unemployment, and incarceration rates, separate and unequal schools and their funding, discriminatory sentencing, and rising violence rates are all things that we've been talking about for more than 50 years, and especially since the Civil Rights Act. We know that our communities are plagued with these things, and so one of the things that is very important to us is to talk about what is that narrative? What does that mean? How are these communities characterized because of what is put out in the media, quite frankly, and what is really talked about in terms of what are the real issues that these communities face? And in response, I think even more now than ever before, there are a certain number of grassroots activists who have become very involved in making sure that their communities can be reclaimed from the kinds of things that happen in those communities when the resources are pulled and there's nothing much there. I would highlight a few, like Mothers Against Senseless Killings, who have taken back their street corners with just the simple things of providing food and a place that's safe during the day and into the evening when children should be outside and playing. It's unreasonable to think that children should live in neighborhoods where they can't even go outside. I'm talking about places like Leonard GLC Harris, who in an effort to change the false narrative created Welcome to Inglewood signs so that it could become something more of a neighborhood or a place where people felt welcome and wanted to be. I'm talking about BYP 100. Millennial activists who are out there dedicating to creating justice, and while BYP 100 and Black Lives Matter have been characterized as anti-police. They are not anti-police, they're pro-people. They're pro the black people that are around them. So I think more than anything, I want to talk about, or I want to think about the fact that we have to empower people in many, many ways to take back their neighborhoods and to understand that their neighborhoods are important in an overall sense to the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago is not just downtown. It is all of these neighborhoods, and unless all of these neighborhoods thrive, the city won't thrive. It's 30% of the community, and it cannot be ignored.
Thank you.
Just following up really what the first panel said and what Sherry's mentioned, talking about view from the neighborhood. First of all, I think we have to understand that the neighborhoods we're talking about where most of this violence is taking place are neighborhoods that feel abandoned, neighborhoods that feel forgotten, or neighborhoods that have been put to the side. It's very discouraging as a person who lives in that neighborhood for the last 42 years to drive around and see empty lot after empty lot, border after building, border building over and over again, and acres of empty lots, and then go downtown and I can't get through traffic because of cranes are putting up new buildings downtown. And it makes you very much feel that your neighborhood is not part of the city of Chicago. It's also, we have to understand of the young people who feel like they're disposable. That 58,000 that was documented in the city of Chicago, 90,000 they say in the county now, of young people, as Arnie mentioned, between 17, 24, 26 years old, who feel forgotten, feel disposable, feel like they are the throwaways of society. And when you feel like that, treated like that, responded to like that, you act out what people treat you like. Number three, we got to understand that these communities, and where this violence is taking place, really 12 to 15, I think, neighborhoods in the 77 of Chicago, but we look at those neighborhoods and see the same consistent thread. Double-digit unemployment, high poverty, proliferation of guns, most incarcerated coming back to our communities with a bus card and $20 and told, make it, don't come back. And then look at the lack of opportunities, lack of business, lack of economic development. So we see communities that have seemingly been thrown away with the young people in them. And as Arnie mentioned, it's not post-traumatic stress. Our young people deal with present traumatic stress. I'm 68 years old and I'm white and can get up and move any place I want. I deal with depression because of what I see every single day in the community in which I live. What do we have to do, I think, for the neighborhoods? A couple of things. First, we have to lobby for them. We have to begin to lobby for an equal playing field in Chicago. We have to fight and lobby in every opportunity we get to speak up so that we equal the playing field between the north side, the south side, the west side, and the east side. I think we have to lobby for our parishioners and our members of our communities to have resources. We need resources to help people, to support people, businesses, places to go to our communities. It's hard for me to value myself if when I look around me every day, you tell me I'm not valued by the rest of society. We have to provide the resources, and I think we have to provide opportunities, as I was also mentioning about our young people. We have about 6 years ago started with reaching out to at that time was 4 main gangs in the community. Since that is now to 7 or 8. We have a peace league that taken through 350 people over the last 6 years, moved to a draft, so on every team, we have 3 to 5 different gangs playing together on one team. And we realize we've had no problems, we have no police, we have no difficulties. We have a bunch of young people say, give me options and opportunities. Yes, we have problems with violence, and yes, we have problems with decisions, but as the soup mentioned, 95% of the brothers out here, 95% of them want an option, an opportunity, something different. Maybe 5% are going to be locked up by the soup, anybody else has nothing to do with it. I'm going to believe those are better odds than what's in this room right now. So I think we got opportunities. That was a joke. We took 50 people, who I call at risk. I don't like the term opportunity youth because we don't give them opportunities. But 50 at-risk youth last July kicked off on August 1st and said, let's take 50. We did surveys on them, the database on them, everything about these 46 to 48 of them would be locked up or shot within the next 2 to 3 years. 50 of them had felonies, some had ankle bracelets on. We hired mentors, we worked with them, with life skills, discipline, family, safety net. As of today, of that 50, 28 of them are in full-time jobs. 20 of them are in part-time, full-time, 26 hours a week. Well, now we're taking another 50 on. But let me tell you what the difficult part is. Getting foundations to say we support programs like this and like Ami's doing, because they say that's high risk, you know, we support working with gang guys, you know, what if something goes wrong? Well, if we don't take risks, we're never going to see anything change. Second thing is jobs. We can put more of our guys in the jobs right now, but companies say they're background friendly, but that really means if you stole from Walgreens some gum and that's all, we'll take you. We have to be serious about saying if we want young people to change, we've got to open the doors all through Chicago and give them jobs and opportunities to make the change. We'll support them, but we need doors open.
Thank you, Father Flager. Sherry, did you want to respond?
I don't want to so much as respond as to kind of understand one thing. Here we are barreling towards the summer in Chicago, and we know what the outcomes were last year. And we don't still have a plan. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about not having a plan is what Arnie and Father Flager said, is that it seems like it is restricted to those communities that people don't care about or see very much. But as you know, that's not always going to be the case. And I think as we've seen these early ravages of the summer, we've seen shootings on 31st Street Beach, we've seen shootings in Hyde Park, we've seen shootings all over the city. The guns are proliferate, and they are everywhere in our city, and they're not going to be restricted to, as Arnie said, one kind of neighborhood. And I wonder if, as Arnie wondered in his statement, whether or not it will take moving outside of the neighborhoods that have been disenfranchised and disinvested to have people start to think that this is a problem that's everybody's problem. It's not just one kind of person's problem.
Sure. The last thing I'd like to say is about this is I'm a great admirer of Father Flager. I never really met him, but he's on the front lines, and he's been there for a long time, and he stays there. And as he said, he doesn't have to. It's easy for me, living in Lincoln Park and teaching in Lincoln Park, to comment. But he's there all day, every day, as is Sheridan, as is the superintendent, when he's not on some television program. And as is Arnie Duncan, who didn't have to come back to Chicago and work firsthand at trying to solve these problems. So I'd like to tip my hat to all of those folks who are doing these kinds of things up front. Thank you. Now, we have Julie Beal, who's Director of Children and Family Justice Center at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, and Rosanna Ander, who's the founding Executive Director of the Crime Lab at the University of Chicago, to talk to us about data and research, of course, as law professors, that's what we would expect from them. What makes Chicago different in terms of the research and the data?
Thank you. Oh, I'm so loud, but I'll use this anyway because maybe you can't hear me in the back. Can you hear me now? Great. Yes. Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate being able to participate in this panel and sitting with Rosanna Ander. I think while all the panelists today that you're going to hear may disagree about the causes and perhaps even the solutions about our city's current gun violence crisis, we all agree that each death is a tragedy. That it's devastating for every family and their friends in the community to lose a loved one, and that it contributes to the ongoing violence and the cycle that we see of trauma, incarceration, more trauma, and then the erosion of hope that I believe Arnie spoke about. My perspective is as a lawyer. I have been representing children in the city of Chicago, Cook County, who are abused and neglected, homeless youth, and now in my current job, kids who are accused of crime. And to be honest with you, the homeless youth, the abused and neglected youth, and my current clients all look the same, which is very sad. I've listened to their stories and I've witnessed what they've told me, and I think as Arnie has pointed out, the client's stories and the reality of their lives are that they're scared. And they do want to try, but they're scared. And because they're scared, and because they feel unsafe and unprotected, they feel like they need a gun. Right? And if you were that child, and you were unsafe, and you felt unprotected, and you had no hope, you might feel the same way as they do. And of course, they're also traumatized. But based on listening to their life stories and the research that my office, the Children and Family Justice Center, has done, and my colleagues, we've written 3 reports on this issue. But I can tell you, and I think everyone has said this already, that there's really no single answer as to why we have an increase in gun violence. But I think it's important inquiry, because I think if we can address and identify the issues about what are really behind the gun violence, we might be able to come up and agree upon better solutions. Certainly the list is multifactorial, and I think that Father Flager already listed them, but from our perspective, I think I'll list 7 of them, because I think we see from our research and from our clients. And the first is the erosion of the police and community relationships, and I think that this is really important to recognize, because we have a history in Chicago of mistreatment and brutality of the kids that we're talking about. And that results in distrust and a feeling that the system's not fair and not responsive to your needs and not responsive to your community's needs. A researcher who addresses this and has studied this has said that people who feel chronically unsafe and unprotected believe the law to be illegitimate. And when they feel that the law is illegitimate, they're more likely to obtain an illegal firearm. Then they can take control of their own lives. Second factor is what we've all talked about: trauma, current trauma, toxic stress, and then untreated trauma, because we're not really helping those kids. The third, again, is the lack of economic investment and the disproportionate economic investment in the communities, which results in, because what we've done, and I think if the research shows this, we've spent so much money on incarceration. It costs a lot of money to keep kids in prison. And it doesn't work, it's ineffective, and it's costly. And the result has been we've spent all our tax dollars on prisons, and we've failed to invest in the communities that most need it. And what results is obviously on mental health treatment, trauma services, jobs, and the kinds of things that we've talked about. I think Arnie talked about this, and I think this is my #1 thing, and I'm going to leave it for the next panel, and that's the access to illegal guns. And until we take on the NRA and regulate guns, I don't know what we're doing as a society, and hopefully at the end of this, every single one of us will work together to take on the NRA. The 5th thing is high rates of incarceration, which we've talked about. And I think we can't talk about this issue without talking about the pervasive and structural racism that exists in our city, in our criminal justice system, and probably in our country at large. And the final factor for me, and this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but some of the research bears this out, is that we have promising practices, and I think Father Flager talked about this, but they're not brought to scale, right? We move on, we don't implement, we don't evaluate it, we don't do those kinds of things, and then we just like, okay, it's too hard, it's not working quickly enough, let's move on to the next shiny thing. And I think this kind of problem is intractable, and you have to have patience, and you have to have really thoughtful things, and not just go from project to project. The one factor that I didn't include on my list is gun possession laws. And I know I'm a law professor and I have my notebook and it makes me look a little nerdy, but it's true. But I think it's important to talk about our gun possession laws. I think that's why I was asked to talk today, because despite the assertions that have been made in the media that our gun laws are weak and the sentences for repeat gun possessors must be increased to solve this gun violence problem, I don't think that that's true, and I'm here to tell you what we've researched. And I also think there's an important point when we talk about laws. There's the gun regulation laws, right? The business, the regulating of guns. We can't even pass that simple law in Illinois, and it's a tragedy in my mind. And the research shows that more gun regulations actually have been shown to affect gun violence, whereas increasing sentencing for possessing a gun, and in our state it's called unlawful use of a weapon, which I always want to tell people because you're not actually using it, right? You're possessing it. So it's important to make that distinction. In any event, my students and I did a 50-state survey to sort of look where Illinois falls in the rest of the nation. And what we learned, and we have a report that's going to come out this summer that will give you way too much nerdy detail on this, and you can see it if you want to read it. But the important points are, one, that Illinois' current minimum sentences for unlawful gun possessions are longer and more mandatory than most other states and the federal sentencing guidelines. In addition, Illinois has increased our gun possession laws, sentencing laws, 6 times since 2002. 2012, and quite frankly, we are poised to do that again this year. Only 4 other states require prison time for first-time possessions. We require that. 37 states, including all the states that border Illinois, allow for alternatives to incarceration for second-time gun possessions. Again, we put people away for 3 to 7 and now up to 14 years. And only 5 states felonize gun possession and have higher mandatory minimums than we do. Only 5, so we're in the worst 6 in the country. And other point that I want to make about these gun possession laws and increasing of sentencing is the research bears it out that they're not effective. They don't deter gun violence. They decrease the swiftness and certainty of penalties, which we know to be the effective way to deal with gun violence. They increase jail population, prison population. They don't achieve the public safety benefits that we want, and they obstruct what I think is really needed here, and I'll get to that in 1 second, which is a comprehensive plan to address this issue. There's a renewed urgency. Obviously, last year was horrible. We all agree about that. I think each of us knows someone who was killed. But my concern is that while it's important to do something, I get that. I think we cannot repeat the failed approaches that we've had in the past, and we have to do something because we're not going to either arrest or incarcerate our way out of this problem. It's just not going to happen. My office, along with 50 other legal and community organizations, maybe some of the others in this room today, called for a comprehensive plan. And we wrote a report called Building a Safe Chicago, a call for a comprehensive plan. I won't read you the entire thing, I'll summarize it quite quickly. Okay, I'm just going to make it really quick, because if you want it, I'll give it to you. I can give you the report and you can read it yourself. But there was 5 things, and I won't even go into great detail. I'll just tell you what the 5 things are in our comprehensive plan, because I think it's important. 1 is to adopt a public health approach to this problem. Okay, I could say a lot more, but I won't. 2 is to reduce illegal handgun availability. 3 is to tailor the punishment to the crime. We have to really understand why people are picking up guns and punish them accordingly, or not punish them accordingly. 4 is to ensure police effectiveness. I won't go further on that, but we know it needs more better training, and there needs to be adopting a lot of the mayor's police accountability task force recommendations. And finally, and I think Father Flavor said this also, we have to achieve equity and investments in our communities in Chicago. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you again for the invitation. I feel very humbled by being asked to be on the panel, given everyone else who's getting a chance to speak, but more importantly, given everyone who's in the room. So I intentionally titled the slides, Chicago at a Crossroads, to be provocative. I really do wholeheartedly agree with what Sherry said. This really is everyone's problem. Even if the brunt of the violence is experienced in a small subset of neighborhoods, this really is something that is affecting everybody, even in ways that we may not realize here in Chicago. Chicago needs to be the economic engine for the region. If people are reading headlines about the violence in Chicago, it is for sure having an impact in all kinds of ways. I believe for moral reasons we should care about what's happening, but even in self-interested economic reasons, we really should be concerned about it and figuring out what to do. I wanted to try to put into perspective what happened last year. So this is just looking at the number of homicides, the raw count, year by year from 2000 through 2016. And if you look at 2016, we had 764. It's actually 768 now, as the superintendent mentioned, with more updated data. People who were killed. And again, those aren't numbers. Those are people. Those are people and families connected to communities that were killed last year in Chicago. The increase relative to the year before, 2015, was 279 additional people who were killed. And that number is almost the same number of people that were killed in the entire city of New York, a city with 9 million people, 3 times our population. So the increase last year was sudden, it was sustained, and again, as the violence is enormously concentrated, it has a spillover effect on the entire region in so many ways that we don't do a good job really fully understanding. So this is just showing that 5 neighborhoods in the city of Chicago that account for 9% of the population accounted for 1/3 of the homicides last year. Just a little bit more background on what we know about the homicides. So 90% of the homicides involve guns. So to really put a final point on something that's been mentioned many, many times, we don't have a violence problem, we have a gun violence problem.
Right.
When you take guns out of the equation, we would not feel like we had a crisis. 77% of the homicides occurred outdoor and in public spaces, which I think has important implications. And many of the homicides stemmed from an altercation. So while we talk a lot about gangs and gang violence, I think it's important to understand that a lot of the arguments are small things that escalate, and unfortunately there's a gun in the waistband and someone ends up dead. So I think as we think about the kinds of solutions that are going to be most effective, I think we need to understand what's driving the violence. What are the homicides stemming from? And also, as the superintendent stated, this year is not looking any better than last year. I think last year people tried to explain away that this was a blip, crime goes up, crime goes down, that's sort of the normal pattern. It wasn't normal, nothing about it was normal, and we are seeing it sustained. And I think if we do not really kind of understand that doing the same old is not going to turn things around, we're going to be in the same boat this year and potentially next year. And I think, we are not a city that is flush with huge resources. We have a state budget crisis as well. So we need to be thinking about what are the solutions that have the most promise and really be as incredibly targeted as possible, because we can't afford to just flood the zone with lots and lots of resources. I wish we were in a position to do that. So we need to be as strategic as possible as we're thinking about the kinds of interventions that are most likely to be effective and how to reach the individuals that are really most involved in the violence. And so when we looked at the numbers or the sort of backgrounds of the people who were homicide victims last year, over 75% of them were aged 20 and older. And if you think about what is the portfolio of interventions we have right now in Chicago communities that's working with that population, I think we're woefully inadequate in how we're responding to that population. We definitely need to continue to make investments in early childhood, in middle school programs, and high school programs. But if we want to stop the violence this summer, this year, we need to be looking at what are the organizations that can work with 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds. So I think the work that Arnie Duncan, the work that Father Flager and others are doing is so important to really be able to bring resources to the organizations that are working with that population, because if we're not connecting with that population, the other lever we have is policing. And I think there is a hugely important role for police to play, but I don't want that to be the only lever we're using. And just to sort of end on, so I do think that there are promising things that have already been talked about, the jobs and some mental health supports for individuals that are actively involved in the violence. And I think it's important to recognize that while they may be perpetrators, they are also almost always, if not always, also victims. And if we only look at them with the one dimension of they have pulled the trigger or they've been a perpetrator, we are missing the fact that they were probably a victim first, but certainly also a victim. So I think we need to be figuring out ways to put more resources into those programs. But I also think it's important to recognize, and it may feel counterintuitive, that we actually need to be putting more money into policing. We need to, I think a fair-minded person would read the DOJ report as well as the task force report and recognize that we have failed these neighborhoods, but we've also failed our officers. We've not provided them with appropriate training, appropriate supports, because they're also traumatized. They're also dealing with extraordinarily challenging circumstances and being asked to solve all of society's problems with the limited tools and training that they have. So I think that part of the solution is investments in programs that are working directly with the population most deeply involved in the violence, and part of the solution is also helping our police department become the police department that we need them to be for these neighborhoods and for our city.
Thank you. Now I have a question. How has the crime lab partnered with the Chicago police? What's the nature of that relationship?
So we've worked with the police department for many years, and it's sort of run the gamut. We've done things like analyze data, so we put out a report, or we did the analysis, and the city and the police department put out a report, I believe in 2014, looking at the gun trafficking patterns. Really, I have to acknowledge that the Chicago Police Department has been extraordinarily open to sharing their data in ways that allow, I think, policymakers to hopefully make better decisions. So really, I think they're really the only police department in the country right now that has made available trace data in ways that allow the city, policymakers, funders, community members to have a better understanding of where the guns are coming from, to naming the dealers that are supplying a disproportionate number of guns that are showing up in crime in Chicago. So we've done things like that, reports, but I think most recently we've been working with the police department to really work kind of embedded in the neighborhoods and in the districts that have the highest rates of gun violence, to provide some data analysis supports, really helping to bring in the information that the police department has, that the community has, to really target efforts more effectively on what's driving gun violence in these neighborhoods. So there's been some media coverage about these strategic decision support centers, which I think are an important but not the only solution. We need to have much more robust community engagement and social services in those same neighborhoods, while we try to improve the quality and effectiveness of the policing in those neighborhoods.
Thank you. Lastly, Julie, quickly, what do you think is the impact of the various efforts of your program on the people that you serve? How have you seen changes? What's the result?
Well, I think that our results, because our work is both individual representation and policy reform, and I think that we see, one thing that we see is by listening to youth and hearing their stories and representing them and helping. We do a lot of work, which isn't really addressing here, but a lot of our work is focused on helping children move on, right? They made mistakes, and helping them get their records expunged, which it's not part of this conversation, but I think it is an important piece, because if you help young people deal with the collateral consequences of being involved in the juvenile justice system, you help them get an ability to clean their records and move on. So we do a lot of work on expungement. We've done a lot of writing about expungement, and there's a bill that's passed both the House and the Senate that's going to dramatically improve if the governor signs it, which maybe all of you can write him a letter and ask him to sign it. That's going to dramatically improve the ability for young people to be able to get their records expunged. And I think that this is just an example of one of the many things that my office does.
Thank you, ladies. Next, we re-invite the Chicago Police Superintendent, the Honorable Richard Boykin, Cook County Commissioner, Colleen Daly, the Executive Director of the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence. While they're coming up, let me make a follow-up point to a point that Sherry made about prisons being counterproductive. Since many, if not most, of the federal prisons are located in rural areas, they're very productive in providing jobs for mainly white, rural, young people who otherwise wouldn't have those jobs. And so we keep them going, even when, as is the case in Illinois, they have no prisoners.
Right.
We'll keep a prison open when there are no prisoners, because we want these jobs for these folks in rural areas who need them. But just follow up on that. Okay, I don't know how you folks want to start. Who wants to go first? Who wants to sit down? Who wants to stand up? You're on your own.
All right, I guess I've been thrust into the lead opposition again. So let me just say this. I support the right for people to legally carry guns and use them for legal reasons. And I forget who said it, but they are right. Chicago's violence problem is a gun problem. That's what we have. Easy access, people willing to pick them up. Most notably and most importantly, people willing to use them. I said it earlier, we need to create a culture of accountability so that a person won't want to pick up a gun in the first place. And the law professor that made comments a moment ago, she's right. We do have tough laws on the books. The problem is we don't use them. And what's the point of having them if you don't use them? Because I can tell you all this. I've been a cop for 29 years now. And I've done nothing but chase bad people around this city. I don't have to do research to know some things. I talk to them. I'm actually on the ground with them. And I know that I've had gang members, high-profile gang members, say to me, not as the police superintendent, but as a commander, deputy chief, they have made the comment to me, I'd rather you all catch me with a gun than for my rivals to catch me without it. Because I know when I go to court, I might do 2 or 3 months and then I'm back out again. That's why it's not a deterrent, because we don't use it. And so, you know, I want to thank the legislature in Springfield for passing the Repeat Gun Offender Bill. Senator Raoul was very instrumental in helping to do that. Because listen, my vision is not to incarcerate more people. My vision is to create a culture of accountability and a mental culture so that they won't want to pick up a gun in the first place. That's what we want to do. I talked to a lot of them. If they didn't have that gun at the moment something went bad, they wouldn't go home and get it, but it's because they have that accessibility to them. So we've been working with DA and ATF to hold the people that are helping that illegal flow of guns into Chicago and hold them accountable, because we need to. But make no mistake about it, Chicago's violence problem is a gun problem, and we need to do things to help resolve that. And some of those things are the economic support, because I tell you this, the same communities that were impoverished when I started as a cop in 1988 are the same communities impoverished now. So we just haven't done a good enough job of giving these individuals a different way. And until we do that, we're going to continue to see this cycle. But I will say this again about the sentencing part of it. You tell me how much sense this makes. On average, a person that's in jail for shoplifting does more time in jail than a person that used an illegal gun. Does that make sense? That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You know, for a shoplifter, somebody that stole a loaf of bread, to spend more time in jail than somebody that used an illegal firearm. That's crazy. Sometimes I think we're living in a bizarro world. And I do. Because that's, you know, people that commit violent crimes. And here's the last piece, and I'll turn it over. So I testified in Springfield about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, about this same issue. And what was heartbreaking for me was that we spent a lot of time debating the offenders of these incidents. And nobody said anything about the victims of these crimes. And Rosanna is right. A lot of times these shooters have been victims. But the folks that are not in that lifestyle, these innocent folks that are affected by gun violence, because 768 people is not just a number, or 768 is just not just a number. Those are people that lost their lives last year. And we have to think about and advocate for the victims of this violence. They deserve our voices. We are the leadership of this great city. They deserve, and we're obligated to do something about it. If we don't touch these impoverished areas, we can, if this was so simple, we would have solved it a long time ago. But if we continue to ignore the socioeconomic ills of these communities, then we're going to continue to see this violence.
I'm going to stand up, my friend. I want to thank Susan. I want to thank the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I want to thank Superintendent Johnson. Colleen, thank you as well. And to all of the previous speakers, thank you. And thank all of you all for being here. I'm honored to be here. I'll renew my call again of the governor and the mayor to declare a state of emergency with respect to this gun violence that exists in certain neighborhoods. I had the benefit of going on a non-community tour last year of many of these communities. Austin, which I represent, West Garfield, I represent. Auburn Gresham, I don't represent, but it's one of the communities, Inglewood. Look, these people are devastated. We have two Chicagos. It's two cities, basically. You have the haves and the have-nots. You have the inequities that have existed now for decades. You have communities that have been disinvested in, and people who pretty much, as someone said, feel like they're forgotten. I mean, there were 9 people shot on one corner in North Lawndale this weekend. The lady was interviewed and she said, look, they've forgotten about us. She said, it's hopeless. They don't care. Nobody really cares about the gun violence that exists because it's confined to certain neighborhoods. But let me tell you, it's like a cancer and it spreads beyond those borders. And folks downtown, it's coming your way. Folks in Oak Park that I represent along with Senator Don Harmon, it's coming our way. And so we got to figure out how do we deal with this gun violence and how do we do it in a meaningful way that makes our community safe. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I've been in office now for a little bit over 2.5 years. And I think elected officials, we failed the people. We failed the people in those communities. Our #1 obligation as elected officials must be public safety and must be making sure that folks who live in those neighborhoods are safe and that they have a shot at the American dream. Look, children growing up in Lawndale, children growing up in Austin, Duggan and Dodge and Bullets. And I just talk about my community because I travel those communities every single day and I hear the residents every single day. And let me tell you, they're frustrated and they're frustrated rightfully so because we haven't come up with the set of policy priorities that we ought to put in place. Look, we had a long winter. But guess what? We're getting ready to have a long, hot, bloody summer. And it's already begun. And I talked to the folks at the Cook County Health and Hospital System, Stroger Hospital, that sees a lot of these shooting victims. And it puts a lot of stress on our county institutions, on the jail, the sheriff's police, which I'm glad they're working closer with the CPD now. But it puts a lot of stress there. I asked them, what is the trend? Are we seeing a lowering of the violence or is it escalating? They think we'll have more people shot this year than we did last year. That is a terrible indictment on Chicago. That means we have not learned the lessons of last year or the year before, and that means we haven't put the policy priorities in place. Now look, we all know Springfield's crushing us as well. We know that the failure to enact a budget that actually deals with the needs of ordinary citizens on a daily basis is driving up the violence. We also know that the failure of the county executive, the mayor, and the governor to sit down in a room and say, hey, we're going to address this issue and we're going to use state resources, county resources, and city resources. We're going to combine them all together and we're going to figure out what do we do. Now, if you're asking me what to do, I put together a 7-point plan. I'm not the smartest guy, but I listen to the people, right? And so point 1 in that plan says that we must have a massive investment in parenting. Look, there's an African proverb that says that the ruins of a nation begins in the homes of its people. I believe that. And that's what we see. This violence is an outgrowth of what we see in the homes. Look, many grandparents raising grandkids are struggling. They don't have the support that they need. So what? Maybe we need a $50 million investment in parenting. What else do we need? We need to make sure that we put a $50 million county jobs bill together. We don't have a summer jobs bill from the county. The city has one summer Chicago, and guess what? All of the folks who participated in that program, none of them shot anybody, and none of them got shot. And so that's a step in the right direction, right? We need to put other supports around. I see that my time has expired. That's the quickest 5 minutes I've ever had. I'll yield there and slow down. Thank you all so much. I appreciate to be on my time.
I appreciate that, Commissioner, because the first job of a politician actually is to be reelected.
Actually, that's not my first job. My first job is to make sure that my neighborhoods are safe and that the people are safe, that they have opportunity, that We'll get reelected.
Thank you for having me. I'm Colleen Daly. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, and I'm very honored to be here today as well. Just briefly to tell you who we are, we've been around 42 years. We're the oldest and largest statewide organization in the country working to stop the devastation caused by firearms. We do programs for youth in schools, but obviously that's not what I'm here today to talk about. We are mostly known for our work on policy. We're the organization for many, many years with defeating concealed carry in Illinois, and in 2013 it became law. And that was because of the 7th Circuit decision, not because of our lack of effort. But right now I want to talk about legislation that we've been trying to move through Springfield. I think everything was kind of laid out perfectly for me. Rosanna teed up the City of Chicago report. And we're hearing all these different things we can do. And I'll preface this with, I don't think, and I think we all know very well in this room, there's not one law. There's not one simple answer to this problem. We need to come at it holistically. But we come at it from the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, since we have policy work, is let's see if there's a policy that we can do that we can actually help save, one life even. It's definitely worth it. So the City of Chicago, as Rosanna said, in 2014 came out with a report that showed where guns used in crimes came from. And what we found out is 60% of guns used in crimes came from outside of Illinois, which was not a surprise because we're surrounded by states with extremely weak gun laws. Most of our guns are coming from states like Indiana and Mississippi. But we found out 40% of guns used in crimes in the state of Chicago actually came from right here in Illinois. And that was kind of a little bit surprising, at least to me, in our organization. We found out that 17% of guns used in crime came from 3 local dealers, all in suburban Cook County. 1 gun dealer in Riverdale, or 1,500 guns in a 4-year period of time were traced back to that gun store. I don't know about you, but something there just doesn't smell right. So what we want to do is simply license them in the state of Illinois. Gun dealers are licensed by Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, but as I think we know in Illinois, also federally, they're grossly underfunded, grossly understaffed, and there is no new money going into ATF to help them actually do their jobs. And we know that on average, ATF gets out to a gun store once every 5 to 8 years. So think about the bad things that can happen in 5 to 8 years in a gun store. And then also if they go out and they find some problems, they have to prove intent. So how do you ultimately prove intent that a gun, there's one missing and you can't figure out where it was? How do you prove that intent? It's really, really hard to sue gun stores. We also know that 1 in 20 guns traced back to gun stores can only be traced back to the gun store. Meaning there's no record of sale. Was it lost? Was it stolen? Did it walk out the back door? We don't know. We have no idea. But if we can license gun dealers in Illinois, help out ATF, and give our local law enforcement the authority to actually go into these gun stores, to go into these bad actor dealers, and hold them accountable. That's all we simply want them to do, is be good corporate citizens. So the essence of the bill is we want background checks on employees. We want basic security standards. We've seen a big uptick in break-ins at gun stores. And if you have basic security measures, it's going to help law enforcement to go after these people who are breaking into the stores and hold them accountable. We also want them to keep accurate records of their sales. I think most businesses do that. And then we also want them to have training. So how do you identify a straw purchaser? If I come into a gun store and I have no idea what I'm talking about, or I'm on the cell phone with my boyfriend saying, what do you want me to get? You shouldn't sell me a gun. And most gun stores don't do that. I will say across the board, 5% of gun dealers in this country account for 90% of crime guns. That's crazy. And of course, it's always the bad actors that ruin it for everybody else. So this bill, we were very fortunate. Our Senate sponsor, Senator Harman, is here today, which carried this bill for 15 years. And thanks to his leadership, we were able to get out of the Senate. It was tough, but it's great. We have some Senator Collins is here as well, and so is Senator Staines. So thank you guys for your support. And I'm sorry, I almost forgot you called me Senator Owen. So wonderful leadership in helping us get this out of the Senate. The bill is currently sitting on 3rd reading in the House of Representatives. We are getting there closely. We want to call this bill for a vote. So I would say to each of you here today, you've heard this said before, we are up against a well-funded, well-organized, we say that they have this this black button that they press, and it instigates all their members across Illinois to get engaged. And they're doing it right now. The corporate gun lobby is spreading lies. They don't tell their membership the truth about the bill. They're calling this bill an anti-veteran bill. Why? Because we require training for people to open gun stores, and they think that if you fought in our military, you should know how to run a business, apparently. But there's a lot of lies, and once we actually have conversations with folks, we recognize that they understand that this is a really simple measure. So I encourage each and every one of you to reach out to your state representatives. Our House sponsor is Kathy Willis. It's Senate Bill 1657. And we're hopefully going to be calling that for a vote either this summer or in the fall veto session, and hopefully we'll get that passed and put it on the governor's desk. So thank you very much.
I'd like to thank these three, Mr. Johnson twice, since he did double duty. I'd like to thank all of you and the rest of the participants, particularly the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform, for having the foresight and the work ethic to put this together. They said I would have 5 minutes, but I don't need 5 minutes. Dealing with the proliferation of guns should be a priority for all of us, but addressing the absence of jobs, of quality education, of quality preschool education, of quality and affordable child care, and perhaps most importantly, of hopes and dreams and racism are at least as important as addressing the proliferation of guns, and perhaps more so. Those issues have to be addressed first, or you can make no or very little progress with respect to guns. Without guns, fewer people will die. There's no question about that. But then the hopeless, the jobless, the disconnected will use bats and rocks and knives and hands. That's far less lethal, but problematic nevertheless. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.